ideas that Starvault dislikes, get your threads deleted. Or better yet, they prevent you, the original poster, from responding to your own threads. It's crazy how far they will take censorship. In the small doses, no one would blink an eye, but it's done on such a widespread scale that it leaves the public opinion of the game somehow incredibly skewed, even though so much is wrong with Starvault and Mortal Online. Finally, we'll speak about the actual employees of Starvault. 3 in specific, who I think are by far some of the most detrimental people to the game and company. Ironically, one of them being the man himself.
Docking permission requested.
These individuals in question are Henrik Nystrom, the CEO of Starvault AB, Discord, the lead game master of Starvault,
Docking request
and Sebastian Persson, lead programmer of Starvault.
Uh-oh. Software developers acting like criminals.
Harmful people to the game and company.
Yeah.
Which again, it's ironic.
They didn't care about this. No.
The lead programmer. How can they be?
You know what I think happened here? Okay, you want to know what I think happened with Mortal, and I really feel like this is it. So they were obsessed with old games, like these guys, like Henrik and all them. They're Swedish and they're obsessed with old games like Risen 1, Risen 2, Risen 3, Gothic 1, Gothic 2, Gothic 3. Two Worlds 1. I have Two Worlds 2 on my desktop because it's a good game. They had difficulty levels much higher and big open worlds. They were crappy and clunky and had clunky combat, and the guys got addicted to the clunky combat because they were the only games with depth back then at all. And so these like weird, like I don't know if they're Swedish, but I think they are. They're like Swedish as I remember. They're not bad people, but they're definitely like sort of like kind of like I would say lunatic fringe software developers that are looking to bring non-consensual PvP kind of trolly gameplay to a modified version of Unreal Tournament. Essentially, they wanted a melee medieval like Unreal Tournament that played really slowly and clunkily, because there was some realism mods that came through the Half-Life scene that kind of set the world on fire. And so they were like, ooh, realism's our thing, and we want to make a medieval Rust Tarkov type thing. And Rust took the world by storm, which was just a basic Gary's mod that took off, you know, that really ticked off a lot of people's boxes, and they saw this. And so they, what I think happened, right, is I'm guessing Henrik's parents probably kicked off right about when he was like my age or something, 40 or something like that, I bet. Maybe a little bit younger, maybe like 30, I'd say 35. Because I've seen the picture, they're older men. They're like 50 to 60 now. So back then they would have been like 40. I think they're 60 now. So it's been about 20 years since Mortal 1 started, right? And my theory of what happened is he got money somehow. He either had success somewhere else, or his parents died and gave him some money, but he didn't have very much money. So he was good at making an engine, and he was good at making what he needed to do in terms of coding and programming. But what he didn't have was assets. And we know that he probably dumped something like $100,000 of his parents' money, or maybe $1 million something, maybe like $1 million of his parents' money on Unreal Tournament assets back in, like, well, I mean, not tournament, but Unreal assets. Like back then it was Unreal Tournament assets, but now it's Unreal assets. It used to be Unreal Tournament assets, but now it's Unreal. So, and he took this and he made the clunkiest, shittiest, fucked up, like bad ripoff of Bethesda's Morrowind that I've ever seen. Even the combat in Morrowind is better than the combat in Mortal 1. Or well, no, combat in Mortal 2 is good, but the combat in Mortal 1 was not good, and it was worse than Morrowind, and it was really clunky like that and shitty too. So, you know, I have some history with this game because I played Mortal 1 the day it came out, and I was a believer for a couple of weeks. I was like, I think there is a lot of depth here, and it's weird because they seem to be really good crafting guys, because the system itself, the crafting system itself, is one of the deeper ones we've ever seen. But they were not good at the combat. They were not good in the respect that they had no income. Like Mortal 1 did not. Like Mortal 1 went free like 6 months after release because it wasn't even holding holding up to the basic shitty standards of the MMOs of the time, and everybody abandoned it in like 3 months, just like most MMO launches. But nobody ever came back. It was never more than 1,500 people after that. And Mortal was always sitting on the background because it had this big launch and all this big talk, and people remembered it well, and they played it when it first came out. But then they realized that it was a clunky, bad, slow extraction game that was clunky and slow for no reason. They easily could have sped up the attack speed and sped up the fucking walk speed, and actually would have been a fairly decent, like, honestly, I think Mortal 1 got to Dark Souls 1. They did. Mortal 1 got to a Dark Souls feel before Dark Souls did. And it felt like Dark Souls when you played it. It was scary. Like, the mobs would kill you in like 5 hits. If you didn't parry, you would die. And if you didn't understand the system after the parry, you would die. And even the skeletons in the first graveyard were really, like, genuinely scary in terms of MMO mobs. You might spend like 3-4 minutes fighting one and still die, and then you get sent back to the priest, and whoever's there robs your body. Someone commits a crime to steal your body and shit. People really like this, but it didn't come across as like feasible and doable and MMO-ish like EVE Online, or even like a better example of, I mean, the game that they really wanted to be, I think, was Gothic. They wanted, and well, really, it's Morrowind. They wanted an MMO Morrowind Gothic that was based around PvP and fighting outside the town, kind of like Diablo 2, because that was the era they came out of, fighting outside the town of Diablo 2. Right outside Tristan or whatever, in whatever the main town is, like Diablo was all about dueling some dude outside the town a lot of the time, and that was revolutionary, PKing people and getting duels and PvP and all that. And so they brought that to Mortal, and they were like, they had a really good system. Like, the crafting in particular was like the deepest we'd ever even seen. Minecraft could hope to be as deep as Mortal. It's got this deep crafting system that's really deep and really faceted and takes a long time to learn. But the problem is, by the time you run to go mine the materials, you're so bored of the game that you don't want to bother crafting the materials anymore. And when you do, you go out into public and you just get slaughtered by somebody who's either hacking or just better at the game than you. And that's what they wanted the game to be. But the problem is, like, sooner or later you have to dumb it down to where everybody can be on a level playing field to the point where they can actually, like, be competitive. And the beginning of Mortal 1 and Mortal 2 were, I mean, the beginning of Mortal 2 was like that, but the beginning of Mortal 1 was not like that. You had to go to the graveyard and fight all these murderers who would kill you right in front of the guards. They didn't care. I mean, they would die doing it. They didn't care. They would just kill you. The whole point of it to them was killing you. And so you would go to the graveyard and you get in these cool PvP fights that had so much goddamn potential. It was the first time we ever saw extraction ever, was Mortal 1. So you can see what they did with this. We later had Escape from Tarkov. We never would have had Escape from Tarkov without Mortal 1. And so we want to give Mortal all this credit because there was really fucking good systems there. But is the game fun to play? Absolutely not. The only time it's fun is when you have a good concerted 1v1 out in the wild with no horses and it's somehow balanced, which just isn't the case. And even then you're going to come across against some ESP hacker, or he's going to call a friend right at the end, or he's going to run around a bandage so much that you can't do anything, or he's just way higher skill level than you, and he robs you and takes your shit, and you get sent back to town with nothing. Now, that's fine, but the problem is the game's so clunky that it's not fun to do the journey back to that point. At that point, you've got to take their crappy starter zone, go down to the fucking graveyard, kill the fucking zombies till you have a set again, take the set out and kill someone else. And while I thought that gameplay loop was actually good, because that's the Rust gameplay loop, that's snowballing, it's actually really good. It wasn't what we needed, and it was so clunky that honestly I'd rather play Morrowind, and that's how you know. I'd rather play Morrowind than that game. I can make Morrowind run better and give me more mobility and faster and get me around the world faster than I can Mortal, which is frankly sad. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the Morrowind run speed, but I bet there's been a video done about it. Almost the slowest run speed in the history of gaming was Morrowind, and the only one slower was Mortal 1. And it's just, I mean, that's why they took they took their book straight from Morrowind, and they were like, yeah, we want everybody to be a really skeletal paced dungeon crawling slow walk through, you know, like there's been a lot of games like that lately, Grimrock I think or whatever. There's been a bunch of games like that where you're like in a dungeon crawler and you take one step forward and you're one step forward in the dungeon. There might be aggro or whatever the fuck else, but it's still really slow. I'm losing my voice. It's so annoying. And so, yeah, and they didn't know this about most people don't know this about Mortal 1 because it hides behind this nothing burger thing. When you first log in the game, you're like, oh my god, it's the depth of Minecraft mixed with, like, Morrowind. And you're like, I mean, yeah, it's like the depth of Minecraft mixed with Morrowind, and you're like, instantly, you're like, this is the deepest game ever made, short of EVE Online. But the problem is, EVE Online, you can play it all day. You can go take a crappy T1, T2 ship, and go kill rats all day long in the belts, or you can go do anomalies. You can go do like many things. You can go do Abyss. You can go get combat in a real and verifiable soloable way all throughout EVE Online, which makes it a far superior game. The problem with Mortal's combat is it's built for 5-mans to do PvP against each other in an extraction scenario a lot like Dark and Darker. So, you know, that's fine, but that makes for a run speed that is just frankly despicable. They like the extractions like Dark and Darker and even Tarkov always have despicable run speed because you're not supposed to be able to run away very fast. They don't want you kiting away. I mean, you can run, but your stamina bar will run out and the guy will catch you usually. So it's like, you know, like running and kiting works if you have the cover and the ability and the background to do it and the expertise and stuff. But you don't often want to do that in Tarkov. You just want to get the kill and get the extraction. It's not usually about running. You want to have a nice 1v1 fencing fight with the guy. That's what made Tarkov so good. Maybe 2v2 or 1v2, something like that. Makes it so technical and so good. And he's waiting in the bushes and looking for you. And, you know, he's got some time on his extraction, so he can sit around in that bush if he wants to. But you've got 10 minutes left in customs, so you've got to get out, and you've got to go past him, and you don't know he's there. That extraction shit is really good, but Immortal invented it, I believe. We never had it, we did not have that until Mortal. It's weird because I want to give Mortal the credit for that. I don't think we've ever had an extraction game before Mortal 1. I don't think so. Like, you would go into the Tindrum sewers. I can do it on Mortal Online 2 right now. You would go into the Tindrum sewers, and you would hopefully have 2 to 5 men, and you would go through this terrible thing that connected to the outer world. And this mattered because if you killed someone in there, you were a criminal because you were a murderer. But it didn't matter because you could make the exit kind of like the under sewers in ESO, in Davin's Watch or whatever. You can make your exit to the outside area instead of where in the city where you made your entrance and stuff. So murder was okay inside the sewers because you could easily leave the Ganker's exit and exit out the real world and deal with the real world out there to make your exit, you know. And so people would be camping the exit pipe, people would be camping the thing, and we had never seen extraction before Mortal 1. I think most of these streamers and people like this guy in this video, he isn't saying the pertinent things that need to be said about why we look at Mortal 1 with respect still to this day, is they invented extraction. We never had it till then. We did not have extraction until Mortal 1. We had no idea what it was. Like, there was the only game that actually provided it, I don't think. Maybe EVE Online could be considered extraction because you technically sometimes had to go into low sec to go pick up something, or go to faction warfare to get your rep up enough to go talk to the T3 vendor to get your reputation bonus back up. EVE Online used to be a lot less forgiving, a lot more about reputation and problems and slow grinds to get you out of terrible criminal acts and stuff like that. It is still kind of is, but not really anymore. You can freely gank pretty much easily. But it used to be if you gank somebody, you lose like almost 1.0 on a 5.0 security status, or not 1.0, but it would be like 0.10, right? So if you kill 10 people, you would drop like an entire fucking point. And on a gate camp, you might actually kill 10 people in 2 hours. So then you're suddenly looking at dropping from 4 to 3, and you can't even run level 4s anymore to get the money solo or even duo or trio or whatever, small gang, to go get the money up to get your gankership back up so you can tackle targets for them. And so this was a serious problem. This is what I think EVE Online did it first back in like 2003, and so did like RuneScape with the Wilderness, and Ultima Online with the Wilderness and all this. But like, you know, Ultima Online did it first, extraction stuff, but we had never seen it in a 3D slow clunky like dungeon, gotta get out of the dungeon, dark and darker, like dark and darker. I don't like dark and darker because I think like there's a company who made their entire fucking rip-off fucking fortune off of walking off of Mortal's back. But honestly, Mortal mismanaged. Somebody should have taken Mortal's shit and made a really big system out of it, and people did. Without Mortal, we never would have had Rust. We never would have had like, because Mortal came out like 2007 or something, really long time ago, like 2004, 2005, right after EVE Online. And they were contenders for a little bit there because they were just trying to break every rule that you could think of. And I liked them. And without them, we wouldn't have we never would have had Fortnite without Mortal 1, because I'd never, like, at least I had never seen, and I think I've seen it all. I've never seen anything remotely close to the initial Mortal 1 graveyard extraction of going in there, banging skellies till you see some asshole that you don't like who's trying to take your boss, or bang other skellies that you want or whatever, or just bang you, one of the three. So you get in a tiff with him. It happened to me, and just like 2 days ago on Mortal Online 2, I got in a fucking spear tip with some asshole in the graveyard, and I was like, here's some traditional Mortal gameplay. He wanted it, I wanted it. We know how cool that extraction gameplay is. It's superior to Dark and Darker, except they mismanaged the game where you can't even like run from the guy without essentially falling asleep or dying of geriatric age. It's such a slow fucking piece of shit. It needed that unreal responsiveness of like a New World. It can be clunky and slow because New World is a lot like Gears of War. You don't move fast. So like, you know, but it should have been faster. And I think they needed to mess with a lot more mobs and a lot more of like renewable crafting things that needed to happen. Like, for instance, if people wanted to go out and move horses around, there should have been a very, very, very strong horseshoe market. 4 horseshoes per horse. The initial iron workers and steel workers and such who make stuff, well, it would be iron. The initial iron workers who need something like cuprum or iron to make their stuff, like copper. We're talking about copper here. The copper crafters should have been able to make horseshoes in an infinity symbol craft for those people, but instead it was like, go out and tame a horse and you can sell it on the market. When you look at it, you're like, oh cool, horse armor is something that you can do with leather working and all this, and there's some cool implementality that they did do. They did actually try, but it's so clunky to go get the fucking ride out. It's like getting to a street fight problem again. The game was so clunky to getting you between point A and point B, between actually having fun and just walking around the sloggy walking sim that frankly would make Kojima blush right after I know he's about to finish the production and direction on his new what's that walking sim game he does that I don't like, that new walking sim game, right? Like that game has 10 times the run speed that Mortal 1 does, even on the horses. And that's a walking sim game about walking really slowly with Norman Kiedis across the land or whatever. Mortal 1 puts that game to shame for no good goddamn reason at all. By the time you get around to actually getting out there and mining the materials, grinding it, getting it to the base stuff that you can actually make something with, getting the books, getting them in your head, training it. This EVE Online suffers from this, but the difference is you have stuff to do in EVE Online while you wait for those things to happen. The slow tick-based time skill system. But in Mortal, you don't. If you don't have the skill, you can't do it. You can't. You literally cannot go kill graveyard skellies if you have no points in a weapon. And if you do try, you've got to start at level 1 like EverQuest. But that doesn't make the zombies any easier. They're the same difficulty that a full armored level 75 spearman like me has. It's the same difficulty for me as it is you. So it doesn't matter how long you wait to fight those skellies, or even if you really it does matter if you wait, because your skills are stacking up if you're training swords with a book that you can't afford because you can't kill skellies. And it suffers from that Darkfall bullshit where they sold the nothing burger. They sold the nothing burger, and they even did something for the scene that makes us want to give them the credibility of playing Mortal Online 2, because some of us know, we don't know how to say it in our hearts and souls, but we know that Mortal Online 1 was extremely prevalent to how the MMO industry ended out, because it was a company that just believed in breaking all the rules and tossed anything in, kind of like Worm Online or one of those where they just kept adding content whether it worked or not, and just kept trying to experiment with stuff like taming and stuff, whether they were Blizzard and had Blizzard money or not. And they failed at almost all of it, and almost none of the systems work. I mean, the crafting works and the combat works in Mortal Online 2, but the PvP doesn't, and there's all these problems. And I don't know what we're supposed to do about that, but I know that the longer we wait around while he continues to cash grab this game, how long till Immortal Online 3? He announced another game, but I don't believe they've seen a meaningful patch on Mortal Online 2 in the 2 years that it's been out. And this matters to me because I spent a lot of time and money on this game. I put like 60 hours into it and like $60, and I gave it my time, and I wrote a really involved, really detailed review trying to warn the other people about what it is that I saw, because it's hard to describe. Traveling for 2 hours and never seeing anything, anyone, or any kind of asset at all, because the game actually is empty and it's like a cash grab. So my theory about what it is that he did, it is a smart theory. This was before all the software Elon developer despot assholes have fucked the world. So the sky was the limit on where their grift could go. And his grift was, my parents kicked off and gave me like $1 million, and I blew 500,000 of it like a crazy man on Unreal assets. Like when the store first opened, when people were like, "Oh, you can't afford this," I said, "No, I got my trust fund money or whatever." And so Henrik dumped his trust fund money or wherever it is he got his money from on Unreal assets, and they were able to make a game out of it. But that's where it ends. They were able to make a game out of it, and there's many games like that. Raft is like that they were able to make a game out of Raft, and Raft is a really good game, but it's not deep and it doesn't have depth, and you can't really go swimming, and you can't really build a real Raft that goes out and experiences like full procedural content or any of that shit. It's all just go to an island and kill you couldn't pay me to play that Microsoft fucking pirate game that they keep trying to push, because it's so fucking sad compared to EVE Online that I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot clown pole covered in fucking diarrhea. I would never touch like that one game that the Microsoft did with the pirates and all that. No fucking way. Because and this game was such a pale, sick, sad lie compared to like EVE Online. We've had a lot of EVE Online clones over the years. And this was one of the more faithful ones to the EVE Online formula. And we were like, oh, can they bring the EVE Online formula to medieval times? And it looks like they kind of can sometimes when you look at pictures like this. But no, every system is clunky. It takes 2 hours to go anywhere, including like the tree that's right outside town. And it's just even on a horse, and it's not good. It's just not good. They could have really made it a lot better. They like the graphics are so good, and all those assets that he bought paid off, and he got rich off Mortal, and he should have gotten rich off Mortal, but they should have like sold it to somebody. You know who should buy Mortal is Bethesda, because if Bethesda had like put all the bloat that they always put in their games into Mortal, we'd have the best game that was ever made. If they were just to give some of these NPCs some voices and put in all that stupid crap that they do all the time and make some weapons that were actually like interesting and stuff, I think Bethesda could have bought Mortal and turned it into the greatest game of all time. And honestly, I've never seen a game that needed Bethesda money more than this one, because you could tell they were serious to be big billionaire like software kingpins at first, and they had a dream that was sufficient. They were ripping off EVE Online like all the really good game development companies do, like Crowd Control Productions. They were ripping off CCP. So, you know, they had a good system here, but I mean, it wasn't going to go anywhere. It wasn't going to go anywhere, because at the point where the gameplay needed to start, all you had was jank, because they couldn't cover that side of the game at all. The planting was garbage. The picking wasn't that bad, but it was still garbage compared to a lot of other games. Even picking plants in Oblivion was a lot more entertaining than picking plants in this game. It was always bland and dry and kind of crappy and seemed like assets bought off some crappy store and all this, and it never did shake that. It never did shake that whole thing. But the problem is this game and its sequel pretty much spawned extraction games, and without extraction we never would have had DayZ. We never would have had like the reason that DayZ probably appeals to the reason why Mortal probably appeals to DayZ players like perhaps number 2 or anybody else, I don't mean to put words in their mouth, is because, like, you know, it is an old extraction game in the vein of DayZ. So, like, you know, like us Rust and DayZ and survival game players came flocking to this game looking for some solution here. It wasn't here because the game is good, and it's a really good game, and it's got deep systems until you get to the gameplay itself, at which point you engage in a terrible taming system, terrible combat system, terrible lag, terrible cheating, terrible people, terrible pressure, terrible politics, terrible, like, fucking memory leaks, and terrible shit in the cities and all this terrible stuff, terrible run speed. The worst problem about all of it is the run speed. They seem to think that slow run speeds equal a good game. Nope. We've learned this. Even Yoshi P. You know who's made the most successful MMO RPG to date right now? It's Yoshi P. And Yoshi P will not fuck with that horrible run speed and no teleports. He himself will just not do it. He won't do it. And a lot of smart developers won't. Like New World wouldn't do it. Nobody will subject their people to travel to getting to a street fight. Getting to a street fight is a really terrible fucking thing. Getting to a street fight, right? So you and a dude decide to square off in the Street Fighter 2 days, right? Get into a street fight, right? From Rick and Morty. I think this is the funniest joke that Rick and Morty did. This one really got me pretty deep, and I put it on my wallpaper for a long time. It looks like this, right? Open image and new tab here. Like, get into a street fight, right? There's Battle Royale, and there's Meth Mode, and there's Pants Free, and there's Urban, and Slappers Only. But the whole skit is this guy gets in a taxi. This guy starts out down by the port, and they've all got to get their manas and their potions and their guns, and they've got to go training first and get their muscles up, and they've got to earn cab fare so they can get in the taxi, so they can get downtown to have their big, like, you know, they live, like, big knockdown, drag-out fight. And it's, and this is the problem, that, and I can't believe it came out of fucking Justin Roiland of all people, but it did come out of is it Dan Harmon? Yeah, it's Justin Roiland, right? Justin Roiland came up with the funniest video game joke of all time, which is getting to a street fight, which is Mortal's problem. Getting to a fucking fight takes 8 hours. I'm dead serious. You have to learn to tame a horse. You have to learn to get the money. It takes 8 hours to even kill a dude in whites with a crappy, like, weapon that you're given when you, like, it's so slow to even go get, like, a single pig killed that you're like why wouldn't I just go live real life at this point? It's about the same speed. To go and kill a pig in real life would take me as long as it does to kill a pig in Mortal Online 1, which honestly could be an appeal if the game wasn't empty and boring and take too long to walk anywhere. And so this get into a street fight thing, this is Justin Roiland kind of pointing out. He made another joke that was really poignant and really funny about this. That I forget the direct wordage, but he was like, it's like Minecraft nerds that live on private servers that make like really elaborate buildings but don't know how to talk to people, which was a really funny, really niche, really good video game joke about people like me that hang out on Rust zombie servers and shit like that. And Justin Roiland, man, he actually really did have like a comedic genius to him. He wrote stuff that I can't write even, I don't think, in a really succinct way like this. Get into a fucking street fight, right? That's mortal, and that's what made it so goddamn bad in the first fucking place. You can have walking sim. I do it in Final Fantasy 11 all the time. But see, the difference is when I walk down the road on Final Fantasy 11, I'm going to see 8 mobs within 45 seconds. I'm going to see at least 8 mobs within 45 seconds, right? That game, Mortal, that is not like that. And I don't know why I fixate on this so much, but I feel like Mortal might have been the big hope to save gaming, and then they fucked it out, did their stupid criminal software development shit that they always do, let the hackers run rampant, sold all the currency, let the duping exist and let it corrupt the game. They sold all the info to fucking hackers, or they just straight up got hacked, which is worse. And like, you know, and because then at least like, you know, if they're selling the info, at least they get money. If they just get fucking like completely breached, then nobody gets money except the hacker. You know,
we'll work our way up to the worst. Firstly, is Henrik Nystrom himself.
Like, look how good this game looks in theory. It looks about the same quality as Lotro did. And Lotro's been a successful MMO in terms of it's always kept like 300,000 people for like 20 years. Lotro's always been like 300,000 people or something. People who really love Lord of the Rings and want a game of it, you know? And so this game looks like Lord of the Rings Online. It's got comparable graphics to it, at least Mortal 1 did. And so people were like, oh my God, this has so much buzz. It looks so good, and it could be so good. And when you get to the combat, you're like, yeah, there could be something really fucking good and deep here. It's super like brutal and deep and savage and really knocked down, dragged me out and bloody and fucked up, and I'm chopping this guy's head off, and it's super fucking good like Conan, right? But then you realize by the third blow that it's the jankiest combat ever executed in a video game. It is. It's like the jankiest combat I've ever experienced.
Henrik is a dreamer.
He's a dreamer, and I like that. And his dreams were better than Blizzard. They were like better than Blizzard. This is a better dream than Blizzard. This is real Warcraft. You see this line of dudes in horses and shields about to storm Tindrum and kick everybody the fuck out of that fucking that auction house and bank that I was standing in so much over the last 3 days, right? This is real Warcraft. And WoW never had moments really like this. There was a few moments like this back in the days, and we do have moments like this, and I've seen it busy like this, but it doesn't have that crazy look and feel of an Extraction Lord of the Rings MMO where there really is like Isildur's army standing here, right? But the problem is, the last time that the game was good like this was in 2007 for a brief period for about 3 months. And the last time that the game was good like this was, and it never happened in Mortal Online 2 because the game was dead by launch. People forget this, and they don't want to talk about the Mortal Online 2 launch, but I will. The Mortal Online 2 launch, right? They lost 99% of all of their populace in the first 4 weeks because that's how long the queue was. The queue for the mainland. I was there for every second of it for a brutal 4 weeks. I sat on their Discord and I cussed at Henrik because I was like, Jesus Christ, I've been waiting for this for 2 years, and I shelled out $60, and I had played Mortal for like 200 hours, and I do know Mortal and I like it and all this shit. And I was like, motherfucker, I've been waiting to even play this game on the mainland like a real game for like the first night. We went 3 days. We sat up waiting for the game to actually launch. I gave up on that, and then 3 weeks later, it finally go to the mainland. That was the worst launch in the history of MMORPGs, and it's no mistake. He wanted people to know how do you sell and hype a game that you've been stealing for 20 years, like Kira did a bunch of exposés about them. How do you keep selling it, right? You announce announce it's been rehashed, you announce it's been remastered, you show graphics that look really good because they're Unreal assets from the current Unreal 5 store, and it looks really, really fucking good. But beyond that, you just slap a new coat of paint on the old piece of shit that nobody can stand, and you don't add anything at all. You actually detract things like having more than one character and stuff like that. And so that is the problem with Mortal, and it's very hard to describe without going on an hour-long fucking like let's talk about Bernie Madoff and his mistakes fucking spiel, you know? This guy was Bernie Madoff. He promised the world, and then he duped all these fucking people like Kira. I'm glad I mean, he duped me. I dumped like $150 into Star Vault, just like I did for Albion, and I feel shame for both of them. They didn't live up to what they wanted or needed to be. Albion's a much better game than Mortal, but it's still a fucking piece of crap isometric farmer where you just get ganked all the time. I'm sorry, but it's like non-consensual isn't good until you make it feel and look like this. The only time non-consensual is good is when it feels like this. Like when it's an 8-man in Rust, like trying to blow in the walls of another 8-man's compound. That's when this shit's good. Otherwise, the 1v1 combat has never been that good, not even in Rust.
I can describe it. He himself...
I mean, people like 1v1 combat in Rust. It's the best 1v1 combat we've ever had in a survival MMO that's like actual survival, like Rust, right? But I mean, it's still not good. It's not good like Fortnite or even Valorant or Apex, or like I would say the combat in Rust is not good like CSGO 2. It's not. It's clunky and shitty, and the bullets are like fucking basically like pellets, you know, and they do the same amount of damage basically unless you're tripling somebody, and it's really clunky and crappy, and then the projectiles are invalid all the time, and just like Mortal's got invalid projectiles too. It's like all these survival games like Psycho Frontier, they have project invalid problems.
Is a bad person, nor do I think
so they talk a good one, but then 3 weeks into the game 99% of the population leaves, and sure, that's because of a faulty launch, but it's also because they realize that it takes 2 hours to walk to the closest pig outside town, and if you forget something you better walk another 40 minutes. And if you get a horse, someone's just going to shoot it with a bow. So why bother?
To blame for my opinion and others' opinions of him. However, with him at the helm of things, the brunt of the fault does fall upon him at the end of the day, allowing terrible practices to continue.
Yep.
Henrik is a man who has an idea, a dream if you will, and he's willing to see it through no matter what. I can respect this kind of determination. But for the aforementioned reason before, you'd realize that having him at the helm is one of the worst decisions for Star Vault's potential and future. His ideas are amazing on paper, but his execution is awful. With no former game dev experience, and still to this
he was essentially a modder. I don't really see much difference between him and me. I think I probably have just the same exact amount of modding experience as he does. And I don't think I have the same game dev experience as him at all. But I believe I have the same modding experience. And I think he started out as like a fucking layman modder. Like a layman. He was like a layman modder. In the respect that he was like an average dude who modded Bethesda games. He had no claim to fame. He had the only money he spent on assets. And like he was like a modder with a dream. And I really like that. But the problem is, if you're going to spin that dream up for 20 years, why not make the product good at least?
A lot of money without the experience to properly get his idea to be fully realized. He allows himself to be coddled by his cult-like community.
Yeah, they really love him because they were like, oh, we can just hack freely and do freely as long as we're your friends and we don't treat you like shit and don't talk shit to the newbies who are spending money. And he's like, oh yeah, get in on the grift. Come on, man. Here, you're an admin now. And they're like, what? And he's like, yeah, you're an admin now. I'm not a professional. I'm a Bethesda modder. I made this shit off of the back of some Bethesda shit mods and some fucking like some duct tape and glue and some dreams about a modded client and on an MMO of Unreal. And they were like, okay, cool. Well, what can we do? Oh, anything, as long as you let me work, leave me alone, and try to make me money. And they're like, okay, and so they did his ad campaigns for him, and they were able to dupe money for 10 years and live as gods on his server, and of course they did for him as he did for them. Of course they did that, but it's a problem.
Down inside of himself, he settles for what he can get at times and doesn't attempt to try and go above and beyond to make his idea reality.
I would say when you're building a world of this scope, one of the first things that you're probably going to have to learn is what you can reach and what you can't. And when he can't, I will say this about Henrik, there's not any systems in the game that don't work to some degree. There's nothing that's completely broken in this entire game, which is definitely something that I couldn't say about most Western MMORPGs at all. There's almost nothing in this game that's truly broken except for the combat, what's it called? The combat tick. That's broken. Right, all the rest of it, except for the lag and the problems, is pretty much like the systems aren't good, but they aren't broken. There's almost no broken systems in this game, which is something to be said about Eastern. I would say he's an Eastern developer when it comes to that respect. He wasn't gonna make a bad game. He was gonna make a game that was so good that it broke our hearts when he only took it 20% of the way and then phoned in and cash grabbed the rest of the 80% and ran with the money.
This is seen through his bad stats.
Like, look how good this game would be if you have flight. There's a game called Project Gorgon that's trying to live up to this, but it didn't even remotely live up to it in terms of the combat or anything like that. But Project Gorgon does have flight, and I don't know why he didn't add flight to this. I don't know why he didn't go the WoW route and just casual up this thing, because the WoW boys were really interested in this game. Even Asmongold was super interested in this game. They all were. They were like, oh my god, it looks like the Lord of the Rings we've always really wanted. This city rivals Minas Tirith. Tindrum is so fucking cool. It rivals Minas Tirith. And all the WoW boys were like, oh yeah, shit, he's speaking our language. They show up and they can't even kill one mob without dying, essentially, because the combat's so clunky, it's shitty, and the ticks are so obvious and bad that you can't, like, it's just bad.
Allowing shortcuts to be taken in the development
and then
process.
When they try to go anywhere or do anything in the game and try to create a community there anyways and try to build it like I did and try to build it into something and make it into something, they are rewarded by being gangbanged by criminals every time they leave town. That's their reward by his crew, is they're just treated as like fish, like in a barrel, for these people that just sit in the background who have been duping money for 10 years and have all the best weapons in the game and all the best armor and all the stupid crap that he let them get away with. So their idea of fun on a Saturday night is getting drunk on mead with their shitty Dungeons and Dragons boomer friends and all their neckbeard friends and everything, and then going through Tindrum, fucking murdering every peasant that isn't in their guild. Right? And that shit's cool if you didn't have an advantage. But you guys have an advantage. I had one of them take advantage of me day one of Mortal 2. He murdered me at the Spirit Healer 3 times before I could do anything. I spawned at the Spirit Healer after dying to a mob or dying out in the world or something like that. And he killed me instantly. He offered me a duel and I accepted because I was like, what are duels like in Mortal 2? And then I was locked into this hour-long thing where, now I remember, he dueled me and he acted like my friend, and he got me to accept a G invite. When I took the G invite, the guild's name was Working as Intended, and as soon as I joined the guild, he was allowed to freely murder me as my CEO. He had kill rights on me, which was ridiculous, and the player was trying to make a point about how this had been a horrible system in Mortal Online 1 for 12 years, and that Henrik hadn't fixed it for the Mortal 2 release, and that this player was extremely mad at us for trying to keep the game alive. He was extremely mad at Henrik and his name was Henrik. Henrik sucks was his name, and he was extremely pissed off that we were falling for the guild thing, and he was pissed off that the mechanic was still in the game, and he was making this tongue-in-cheek fucking like documentary about working as intended when it comes to, like, if you join a guild, the GM can just auto kill you and loot your shit. And freely do so without murder charges, right? And that's working as intended, which was the whole complaint from the Mortal community since day one. So, like, I look at like the only hope that I've seen in the MMO scene in 20 years isn't like New World or like AOC or even like PAX Day. It was Mortal, but the execution, I could have done it better with my computer right here in my living room. I could have done better than Henrik. I would have fixed a lot more problems than him. I don't think I could have created it as well as him because he's got more of an artist's eye and like a, you know, like a creator's eye. I think he's a creator. I don't think he's a polisher. I don't think he polishes the turd. I think he just makes the turd that we all love. And so I wish somebody had polished the turd, because somewhere in here is I'm convinced of it, is the greatest RPG ever made. If you could have a better run speed and perhaps flight and perhaps like 10 billion more mobs than what's actually in the game, and have them be like kind of coinciding with each other, and have the wolves eat the pigs, and there's always wolf and pig warfare and all this stuff. There needed to be a lot more interaction in the world. He didn't need to add anything to the world that wasn't there. He just needed to add a lot more to it. Like a lot more to it. He needed a lot more towns. He needed a lot more run speed. He needed a lot more mobs. It just was an empty, bare bones world.
Community to gaslight his actions.
Look how truly beautiful this game can be when you go looking for the cinematics that are actually there. I don't think any game rivals it. I can't think of another game that was, maybe Elden Ring had this kind of scope, or even maybe even at times, even though it's linear, Bloodborne had this kind of scope, like aliens crawling, giant aliens crawling on giant buildings way off in the distance, and you're like, oh my god, that alien is the size of the Statue of Liberty, and it's like literally a god-killing alien that I don't want to fuck with. When you first see it, you're like, what's with the aliens crawling on the side of that fucking castle over there, the size of fucking like the Statue of Liberty? What's with that alien the size of that, you know? And you're like, what the fuck? Like Dark Souls had moments like that. What's with that dragon the size of a fucking mini mall, you know? And the scope of Mortal was there, and even the execution and the beauty and the dark greens and the water and all the stuff that you look for in a game. But the execution was that of, what's a good example? I know. I've got the perfect example. The execution was more bumbling and more fucked up than Star Wars Tor. SW Tor. The Tortanic, as I used to call it. The worst failure in the history of MMORPGs was SW Tor, but nah, Mortal did worse. Mortal had a better game than SW Tor, with 1/10 of the budget and 1/10 of the people and 1/10 of everything, and they had 10 times the vision. And then the execution was like, oh my god, you promised everybody in the public a Lamborghini, but when we went to drive it, we were going 4 miles an hour.
Thinking this is okay.
This is not okay either. It's like it's in a way, it's, to me, it's like theft. It's like you promised something, you promised you were gonna do something, and honestly, you know what I think Star Citizen dude is doing? He's just trying to make the graphics where everybody is so happy with the graphics that they just don't care if there's no real game there. And I think this is what they all try to do when they're ripping off people for $1 billion.
The day.
I'm sure that Mortal 1 and Mortal 2 made a combined amount of something like $250 million, and I'm convinced that at least 20 or 30 million of that dollars went directly into Henrik's pocket. I know this. And this is another reason why they do these cash grabs, is they don't care if we don't like the game. They don't care about that.
Sincere person.
They don't care if they even spent 20 years and made it into their baby and then abandon it. They don't care. They still go home at night to a giant pile of money in their sports car and their nice McMansion out in the hills in Sweden, where there's no crime and no problems.
I feel like he is personally having his trust, taking advantage of by many.
I mean, they've got problems, and not like us. They don't have gangbang drive-bys or Uvalde, Texas, or fucking crazy people in the streets, or streamers spending too much money, or any of this stupid shit. They do, but to a much smaller scale, 1% scale kind of thing compared to us. They're not bloated, rich Western people. That's not their style. They're hard Nordic, like frozen tundra people that carved their living out of the snow. And you know this, and it's weird for them to suddenly phone in the rest of it. Something tragic happened here, but we're never going to know what it is. You know what I hope it is brain damage. You know what happened to Nozomi? He was brain damaged, and he was at one time the lead Final Fantasy private scene developer, and then he got brain damaged in the army, and now what's left is essentially this. What's left is this. The same Mortal Online execution is what happened to Nozomi, and it broke my heart in the exact same way Mortal did, except on Nozomi, I spent 750 days. I spent 750 days of my life on Nozomi, 2 solid COVID years.
He also might realize.
And then the execution of Nozomi, for no reason of his own fault. Nozomi just got catastrophic brain damage like me, but he can't even talk. If you guys want to see what Nozomi looks like, I'll show you. He's one of my biggest heroes, but I mean, this is somebody with actual brain damage like me, way worse than me. Nozomi speaks, right? Nozomi speaks about his server and stuff. Like, I don't know if we'll see him, but I hope I will see like a Nozomi FFXI like talks, right, or whatever. Nozomi FFXI, right? I don't know if we'll see any videos of his. He might have taken it down. But I want to see Nozomi talk, because he did like talk there for a while in the years that I was there. And when he showed up, he was this broken man who could barely form a cogent thought, who was leading this like big push on the Final Fantasy XI private server scene in a real and verifiable way, but there was a shell of a man left that couldn't do the mental gymnastics required to make Nozomi the great thing that it needed to be. And so then other and that's when the cracks began to show, and then the cracks begin to show, and Wings and Horizon stepped to the horizon, right, and like slaughtered Nozomi when he was the one who gave us like 8 years of the best Final Fantasy XI server ever made. And it's really sad, but Wings and Horizon kicked him in the nuts, did triple the numbers instantly overnight, and stole his whole vibe, did it better with better execution, and left him in the dirt. And the last time I saw Nozomi was on Horizon, on his character Pepsi. This is an interesting thing. Nozomi used to show up to these fucking fights and watch these guilds kill these, like the lead dev himself used to show up at these fights, and he would unstealth, and he would just watch them kill. I have a friend named Prathan who was a GM on Wings, who was part of that whole crew. And we had a falling out because I'm not that loyal to Final Fantasy XI like they need me to be. But like, I know a lot about these developers and the foibles and the things that make them who they are. Like, honestly, if I could put the mortal mobs into Rust zombies, I could build the greatest MMORPG ever made, hands down, no problem. Even if there was guns. Even if the guns were still in the game, which I wouldn't. I would take them out, and I would do the same medieval system that the Rust has the good combat to do a good medieval system and honestly, Face Punch was gonna make a medieval game. It was called Dust, just like Rust. I want my Dust, and now it's got to be PAX Day because they didn't make Dust. They should make Dust. They shouldn't make Rust 2. They should make Dust, you know? And let Rust just like decay into beautiful, like as a beautiful memory. And I think they should take all their money and make Dust, because Rust would be better as Dust. You can tell that most of Rust was this thing that they did with PvE in mind, like just to give themselves something to do while they waited for clan fights, I think. And that's beautiful, and it was the best. It was the closest we've ever flown to true survival MMORPG. Sun was Rust. It wasn't Mortal. It wasn't DayZ. It wasn't like World of Warcraft or any of these survival MMOs and stuff. It wasn't Cycle Frontier or any of these extractions like fucking Tarkov. It was absolutely Rust. And I want a Rust medieval game so bad that I'll play games like Mortal and try to pretend that they aren't broken. But really, I mean, this is a broken game.
That shrugs off the responsibility of dealing with his company and game problems head on.
Yep. Very, very, very
astute.
astute.
You have a good idea. You just don't have the right people around you That,
No,
or you've got
and he
crazy
surrounded himself with like right about when Mortal 2 hit, NFT and all those hackers and all those scammers and all those botters, all those worthless piece of shit, fucking crab garbage people infected his entire scene and turned it into a fucking hacker's fucking haven. And it wasn't good for the game, not at all.
to give everything 110% every day. Not to mention, you come off like a salesman more often than a passionate game developer
Yep.
and CEO. The second person on this list is Sebastian Person. We'll call him Seb for short. Seb is a person who does not take criticism.
That's what they call him too, Seb. I know all these things because I did play Mortal for like I don't know 200 hours when I was young, and I remember watching the videos and reading about this game and hearing all the names and all the problems, and I remember hearing about Seb back in 2008. You know, 2008, fucking 15 years ago.
Quality as a person.
Yeah, I remember these
Especially when
names
it
and I
comes to
remember the
games he
drama.
works on. Perhaps I don't know enough from behind the scenes to know if his choices in development are his own or someone else's. Maybe Henrik even. But most of the content I have experienced that he himself has worked on, he has stoutly defended a lot of it, even going as far as to lie or completely shut down players who finds problems in it. Firstly, there were numerous amounts of bugs in the original Portal Online that were left unfixed and either plagued players consistently or abused for a gain or to maliciously harm the game or the players in it. Secondly, many of the patches that came out bringing out new content resulted in immense instability, half-baked content, and generally introduced more bad than good. Thirdly, which was the point I opened up with, Seb has a problem when it comes with criticism. If you want two examples of things he worked on besides Mortal Online, look up Mortal Royale or Kit, K-I-T-T-E-N-E. Then come back to this video and try to tell me the content that is pushed out is above whatever is, quote, good quality, end quote, in your mind. I'll bet it is not. Seb has been a very personal person towards people who disagree with him or his ideas, and it's even gone as far as to act super unprofessional and attack players either on the Steam platform or on their forums. A lot of this probably can't be found now due to the old MMO forums being mostly nuked due to the data breaches and hackers. Amazing that you can't go back, right? Finally, we touch on the last person with the least amount of power from a business standpoint, but nearly more power than both people combined for some very contextually specific reasons. Lead Game Master Discord. After all, he's just a game master. Surely he doesn't have that much power. Wrong. He has complete access to everyone's accounts through the web portal, aka the account page. He can handle and process payments, change info, etc. He also has access in-game to spawn and do as he likes. Given his close time with Henrik, from originally meeting him on Ultima Online, LGM Discord has been given a lot of trust with power he has time and time again irresponsibly used. Just to name a specific point in time, remember earlier in the video how I mentioned an individual part of Star Vault released their data on accident into an IRC channel containing their login info to a GM account? That was LGM Discord. Due to LGM Discord's actions, his account was compromised and used to maliciously attack in-game assets with GM commands, deleting keeps, killing players, etc. This individual also had access to the web portal, which they didn't use in their attack, thank God. Discord has also been noted to be quite egotistical and pivotal in a lot of in-game disputes that has left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I can personally speak of two experiences where he clearly handles things on the fly and by ear, as most of my resolutions end up being some half-assed experience. For example, I once had my entire bank disappear, and I couldn't access any of my items without speaking to the vendor. What does Discord do when I contact them? Sure enough, my items are back. But now now I had doubled everything. His response? Wait, he didn't do anything about it? Nope, he just left it as is. Even with coming and returning all of my items, but allowing me to have double of everything, he did not do a single thing even after I had told him. He just let me have a duplicate of every item in my bank. Could you imagine if I had stacks of gold or other items that were worth of extreme value? Another example of an issue I personally experienced with him was I once had all my gold disappear from one of my banks. LGM Discord comes along, sees that it disappeared, and what does he do? Does he reimburse me for my lost gold? Does he try and figure out what's wrong with the issue? Nope. He just hands me an absurd amount of random gold and says, it's fixed, and leaves. I was ecstatic about this. I was super happy. I almost felt like he was an idiot for making such a mistake by giving me so much gold. But then, I realized something. When I went to the other banks in the other towns, it dawned on me that my gold was now missing from every single bank except the one where I originally had it missing.
Aggro.
And then I came to the realization that LGM Discord didn't give me a bunch of gold. He just took all my gold out of all my banks and then gave it to me in one spot, making it effectively useless for me to go to other towns because I no longer had any gold anywhere. And that honestly was just... These are just such small issues compared to a lot of other stuff I've heard that he has done and have experienced firsthand. But Discord is just so unprofessional. He's abusive both as his power and in chat. And he's honestly one of the worst game masters I've ever had the displeasure of knowing an MMO in any game I've ever played. Part 6. Mortal Online 2's gameplay experience. Mortal Online 2 attempts to flex its usage of the Unreal Engine 4 by introducing smoother gameplay as opposed to how it was originally in Mortal Online 1. However, Mortal Online 2 falls flat on its face in the process. The biggest problem that players immediately learn about after purchasing the game is that there is only a single server located in the EU, meaning if you live anywhere outside of the EU, you will be at an inherent disadvantage. Starbolt and even the community have tried to defend this point by saying that, quote, ping normalization, end quote, handles this issue well, where players are essentially giving artificial lag to raise the baseline ping to make it more fair for players that are outside of the EU. However, being a North American player who has had some of the lowest ping possible at one time, clearly saw and felt the ping disadvantages many a times. And anyone that I've played with or played against and spoken with, they agree with this. The combat is slow, janky, and unreliable. Many people will try to tell you it is extremely fast, even though compared to other melee slasher games, this is just simply not true. And the best part is Mortal Online 2 is slower than Mortal Online 1. It suffers from an over-defensive playstyle, allowing numbers to be more of a dominant factor rather than skill. Duels are either one-sided or 10-minute long fights due to how players can essentially block everything with no real mechanics in place to be aggressive. And it is one of the worst games you can play for a medieval slasher experience. The magic in the game feels boring, unimpactful, and yet it is so necessary to the combat of Mortal that it forces players to use it. Visually speaking, it is worse than the original game. Mounted play has been mostly fixed in Mortal Online 1, but has brought on the thing Mortal Online does best, making rolls obsolete or extremely broken. Unlike Mortal Online 1, where all mounted rolls were extremely strong, in Mortal Online 2 you will typically see only mounted archers, as mounted mages and mounted melee are easily dispatched or extremely unreliable. Skill has been swept aside for favoring larger numbers, meaning guilds which have many members that then form alliances with other guilds will simply win any fight due to their numbers, and sadly no amount of skill can fix this. Aside from PvP, the PvP in this game is abysmal, just like the original game. It is boring, further away, due to the map being 6 times the original size of the MMO.
It's just too big.
It's too big. The only upside has been the bosses, which are given their own unique feel instead of just having regular mob skins, as well as increased HP and damage. The game still has many optimization issues, whilst also lacking the inability to personalize your preferred graphical setting. For example, you are unable to disable shadows or foliage, to gain more FPS, as Starvault and some parts of the community attempt to argue these, quote, lower immersion, quote, and, quote, prevent people from hiding from you, quote. Even though being a player who has used INI edits, with INI edits being your personal graphic settings in a text editor that the game reads to determine how your game should look, with having shadows disabled, the game is darker, and with foliage disabled, it only gets rid of the clearly copy and pasted grass on the ground, which adds nothing to some players' experiences. You can get in trouble for even mentioning you're actually editing your INI files. Starvault claims that this is cheating, and many players have bought into the strange idea, even though it is extremely common in other games that have optimization issues to allow INI editing. A game that comes to mind that boasts this idea is PlanetSide 2. All in all, the game runs horribly, and I believe the game will never feel good to play. Even like one ran better, it felt better to play due to the fact that you could edit many of the graphical options with better game performance. Part 7, the community. Mortal Online 1 and Mortal Online 2 have introduced me to some of my best friends, along with some of the most scummy, degenerative, manipulative people I've ever known on the internet. These people will push out whatever narrative they like to suit themselves, from lying all the way up to doxing or attempting to breach your accounts and information.
Yep. Sounds like community I know.
Players in the community typically play it safe by simply using an effective tactic of social engineering their ways up a ladder with Starvault by continuously praising the game for better or worse, whilst giving themselves near immunity to rules put in place to prevent malicious activities. Much of what players tend to do is cherry pick and take events or words out of context to slowly build a story to present to Starvault in place of actual proof to essentially demonize players or groups of players. Even though this is done in many game communities, this tactic typically ends up with players actually getting banned or punished even if they had done nothing wrong. But at the end of the day, many of the players, even those that you befriend, are fair weather friends at best. You typically get treated as another number or an object in someone's weird schizo way. I'd highly recommend never befriending anyone for Mortal, as giving with the many experiences I've had, it typically leads to drama that stems from some advantage gained in-game in the process. It's quite sad at the end of the day, people value their pixels over actual relationships with people. Final thoughts. I wish Mortal could have been a successful game, and I know that making this video will garner a lot of hate from people who played Mortal, or it'll be looked at and laughed at, but at the end of the day, I believe in the idea that if you stand by and do nothing, nothing will happen.
Yep.
The last time I made a series like this on the original Mortal, it was met with a lot of attention and praise, and a bunch of the criticism that was given was mostly just attempting to trash me and not necessarily my arguments, which is whatever. But however, as time has carried on, I've cared less and less about how people perceive me, and I've come to realize it's better to just put how I think about something out there and not give a fuck what anyone else thinks, especially when it comes from players who are dedicated to playing Mortal. Because if I'm being honest, these are some of the worst people to ever associate with online in terms of video games.
Like Rust. Yep.
The first game failed. The second game's gonna fail. The game is quite literally, in my eyes, a straight up scam.
Yeah.
Never let someone talk you into playing this game. Don't talk yourself into playing it. I've done this many a times where I have talked players into playing this game, and all it has done is made me realize after the fact how much of a bad idea that was. And I know sometimes people are looking for something to play during this, what I would call a game drought, where nothing's coming out and everything is boring and the quality is low. Mortal Online 2 is not the answer to what you're wanting. It is a scam. You essentially buy the game and then pay a sub to play on one character, and if you're not a European player, you already are going to have so many disadvantages up against you from the very beginning. Again, I personally think, even with all the game's problems, from the cheating to the exploiting to the terrible game design, the lack of transparency in design choices and as to why they do things, I honestly feel like the community is the worst part. You know, I've talked about this many a times with friends, and we agree more often than not that any game you play is going to have assholes in it. That's fine. Assholes are fine. I don't care. I don't care if someone is an asshole. It doesn't really make a difference to me. But the people who play Mortal are on a completely different level, to the point that it makes me feel I am playing with actual sociopaths and psychopaths for
Yep.
the most part. You will meet people who will go out of their way to befriend you over months, even into years of time, and you will eventually learn that the only reason they associate with you is because you give them something, or they gain something being friends with you or associating with you. And the moment that you find that out and you confront them on it, they'll flip a switch and all of a sudden they hate you. Had this done to me many a times. At the end of the day, like, I've just realized that I'm better off not having a bunch of friends, especially if they are like these people. It's sad to say that I have had to deal with it a lot, being friends with people who end up just being terrible people and don't actually want to be your friend per se. They just want you there for something that they eventually end up gaining from you. It's pretty shit. Like, I just would not recommend associating with anyone in Mortal. I quite literally don't talk to anyone from Mortal anymore because of this reason alone. I feel like these people have hatred and drama just bred into their minds, and their lives are so sad and unfulfilled that they basically have to live out these power fantasies in a video game, and the moment you start to break that down for them, they turn on you. But beyond that, again, I feel like the game's overpriced. I feel like the sub price is stupid for what you get. The game's population just goes down every day. I mean, even though it has more pop than the original game, considering it came out in January, and we're now in April, like, I can just pull up Steam charts right now just to prove a point, because I'm pretty sure the peak for MO2, yeah, right here, the peak for MO2 was 9,618 players on Steam. That's a lot of people. That's actually pretty good for a peak. But then you look at the trend from January to April, today, the 24th, and you just see a downward trend in population. The last 24-hour peak was 1,901 players, and 4 minutes ago, 1,533 players were playing. You're talking nearly anywhere from 20 to about 15% of the original starting population is still here. And while some people will think that that is super common, where players basically get reduced to 10% of their community, successful games do not have this trend.
Nope.
Successful games tend to
always go up very
keep
slowly.
their player base for quite a long time, especially if they don't change it and make it worse. But the fact that MO2 has only been out for about 3 months, and it's already down to about 20%, I wouldn't even say 20%, it's more like 19 to 15% of its original player base in the span of 3 months, and the fact that they are not being on time with patches, there are still cheaters, there are still exploiters, guilds are still allying up and basically reducing the ability to play in small groups. This number is only going to keep going down. You're obviously going to have the dedicated player base that hangs around and supports the game through thick and thin no matter what. But even Henrik, the CEO of Starvault, said himself that he needs a certain amount of people subscribed to the game at any given time in order to be in the positive. And I can tell you right now, from these numbers alone, that is not happening. There is no way you can sit here and tell me he is reaching these numbers with this data that is publicly available. It just will not happen. I at one point was playing Mortal Online 2 quite a lot, and I was very optimistic. I even told myself that I would let go of a lot of the mistakes in the previous game, and I would let a lot of my heavily bias go in order to give me a better judgment of how MO2 would go. But I feel like the last few months that I did play it, the game has just spiraled downward. You know, the game comes out, the servers are a mess for 3 to 4 weeks. People are raiding in 30+ hour games. The game is unstable. It's unoptimized. The PvE is super boring. The PvP is either Zerg or fight someone who simply just has an advantage over you that you cannot help. The game has so many unnecessary time sinks. The map is so incredibly large to the point that you have to ride a mount, and even then it takes forever to go from point A to point B. The community is fucking terrible. You can't have any kind of realistic arguments with anyone or debate anything because people will stick to their guns even if you present proof that they are wrong. The community heavily censors itself, and Starvault censors it on top of that. So having an opinion that might be right doesn't always necessarily mean that it's going to be seen, and even if it is seen, it gets shot down. There's been plenty of times where I have presented an opinion, or even a fact. We'll go with the fact. I've presented a fact, and the fact that I am who I am immediately detracts from what I say. So even though I could say 2 + 2 = 4, because someone knows who I am and they don't like me, they're just going to staunchly say 2 + 2 does not equal 4, it equals 5. I know that's a silly example, but that's really how it is. Like, that is how some of these people act. They will, no matter how right you are, they will straight up tell you you're not right. You don't have it right. You never were right. And the best part is I've had an example where I've said something, and then people will agree with it, and then once they know who I am, they will backtrack and then disagree with it. So that just tells me more than enough that people are super fair weather in this game. They're not smart. You know, I hate to generalize everybody that plays Mortal Online 2, but if you play the game, I think you're a fucking moron. Like, I just legitimately think something's wrong with you. Something was definitely wrong with me while I was playing it, because the game makes you act different and perceive people different and do things differently. It makes
that's how Rust was for me, and I didn't like it. Yep, I didn't like it.
So much of your time.
Yep.
That
you're just toxic.
It literally does have an effect on how you are and how you act, and that's why when you go, if you ever do play this game and you interact with people in the community, you'll see what I mean. That these people, they don't act normal. They are very much far from being normal people. I don't know. I just feel like it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. I feel like the developers have not changed at all. I feel like they have shown some commitment to being different and doing more positive things. Like, I think Hendrik coming on Twitch and streaming every week, or at least I think he tries to stream every week. I don't know if he's actually done that consistently. I think that's a good thing. I think the increased interaction between developers and the players is good. But the last time I was in the Discord and like went to these streams, I hate to say it, but they were failed attempts at doing something positive. Every time Hendrik streams, you see the same 20 questions asked. When are we getting votes? When are we getting this? When are we getting that? Why does this work this way? It's always the same questions. It's never anything new. It's almost as if people have to ask the CEO of the company the same questions over and over, even though they already know the answer. And they do it because they don't necessarily care about the game becoming good. They just simply want what they want in the game, and then that's that. You know, I find it hilarious.
It's the human state of affairs. Yep.
Servers were having issues. You still had people asking when are they going to get votes in the game. When you literally couldn't even get into the game to play it. And that just goes to show the kind of mindset that these people have. It's not about the game being good, it's about the game suiting what they want. And in a sense, that is the consumer's right, but how are you ever going to have a game that lasts long term if all it does is appease the vocal minority of people all the time, which I hate to say it, Mortal does quite frequently. I don't know, the game's just not fun, it's horrible. Like, you sink so much time into it and you get barely anything out of it. The fact that you can't even go and play with your preferred settings without getting potentially banned or reported by a player is stupid. That makes no sense. I don't know, I just feel like Star Vault has ruined their redemption and trying to make MO2. It is a asset store game in my opinion. Almost everything in the fucking game has been bought off an asset store. Barely anything in the game has been handmade. It's all been bought with money and then just dropped in. And that's why a lot of it just looks like shit most of the time. It looks not normal. It doesn't look in place. And the game's just awful. I just don't know how else to put it. The game just sucks. And honestly, I feel bad for you if you feel the need to play it, because I know there's some people that I used to associate with. They think it's great and they play it all the time and they don't play anything else. Mortal is their life and it always will be until, I guess, Mortal Online 3 comes out or until it shuts down. But, you know, I think at this point, you know, with me making this video, my association with Mortal is pretty much done. I can't be fucked to keep coming back to this game and like trying to play it and then like try to interact with the community, and it honestly is just a waste of time. Mortal Online is like one of the biggest wastes of time in terms of a video game you could possibly do. There's literally nothing to gain from it. It is just a very boring, stressful headache of a game. Would give it a 0 out of 10. And I mean, you can literally go on Steam charts or you can go on Steam itself. You can read all the reviews and you can immediately tell that a lot of the people who rate the game highly are clearly people who like the game. And the people who rate it lowly, you'll clearly see they present very common basic problems that games shouldn't have, but this game does have. And you will see people go and viciously attack these guys over their reviews of the game, saying that it's bad even though their points are correct. Don't play this game. It's fucking garbage. The developers are scummy and the players are more so scummy. Fuck Mortal Online 2 and fuck the Mortal Online 2 community. I fucking hate all of you. You all fucking
That was the most
aggro.
I don't know, he had a lot of really good points though. I want to see what else he has to say. I actually like this guy. It's funny. He seems like one of the few to like talking the truth. I like exploring Mortal because it's always interesting. There's always weird shit going on. What else he has to say? What is Turtle WoW? He got 151,000 views with this fucking keep effing my wife's mouth video. Why Mortal Online 2 is bad. Territory control. So which one did we do? Did we just watch? Monetization, PvP. Yeah, let's watch all of these. It seems good. Part 1. There, yeah, let's do it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel.
I want to play all of this.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel.
Perfect.
I recently made a video talking about Mortal Online 2 and why I think territory control isn't a good thing at this point in time for Mortal Online 2. I obviously got a lot of negative feedback from it. A majority of it was just people who were upset because I threw the truth in their face and they don't like it. But this video isn't really for them. But it did make me sit there and reconsider my stance. Should I keep making videos about Mortal Online 2 or not? And I think the reason why I was so adamant about not making videos on this game anymore is because I feel like I have just covered this game and all of the bad things plenty of times, but I feel like a lot of times people refuse to go on my channel and look at the evidence that is there. So what I decided is that, one, I like exposing this game. I really do, because that way people can slowly begin to learn, whether they know or not, that there are a lot of issues with this game. And number two, I feel like
I'm out of axes again. Damn
I'm
it.
the right person to speak about it. A lot of times people don't speak about the issues on Mortal, especially on a platform like YouTube, simply because they don't care, so they just complain and whine in silence, or in their private Discord communities, guilds, whatever. But I've always exposed Starvault for the stuff they do, and I've always caught a lot of flack from it, from both sides, people who both like it and people who don't like it as well. So
Yep.
I changed my stance and I said I'm going to begin making a series of videos that talk about very specific things in the game that I believe are not good. But while I'm also doing that, I'm going to try and remove my bias from the situation. I'm going to try and remove my unapologetic nature out of the videos, so that way I can just give you guys straight information and you don't have to sit here and decide whether or not what I'm saying is even true. I find a lot of times people fixate on things that I say and they misinterpret them. And while that is ultimately their fault, I'm going to now make videos in the future to quite literally systematically break this game down and explain why it's not good for each of the things that it has. And today we're going to focus on territory control. So I've got a list here that I have made with points, and we're just going to go through it because I felt like this is probably the best way to do something like this. Speaking off the top of my head is fine, but I would rather just stick to exactly what I think and just be clear and cut. So obviously we're going to start with point number 1. Territory control, it failed in the original game, Mortal Online. Some people refer to it as Mortal Online 1, but it is just called Mortal Online. So why did it fail in the original game? It was used to block off content. A lot of times people would use territory control to quite literally prevent other players from doing content in the game. So imagine you go up to the Minotaur dungeon in MO2 and players have built walls completely around it and you can't even access it anymore. That's how it was in MO1. In MO1, people would constantly cut off content from other players. Now obviously people would say, well, if it's blocked off, why don't you siege it? And that's a good question. The reason why people oftentimes didn't siege these things
because it takes too much time.
It would just get rebuilt when nobody was around, and it would be blocked off again, and you had therefore wasted all your time sieging it. So there was ultimately no point because you couldn't get rid of it permanently. It would just get rebuilt. It was exploitable, allowing players to build things in unsiegeable locations. So in MMO1, there were territory control towers, and they would build up a radius over time that would soon cover a certain amount of land that players could then build in the radius of without it taking any kind of damage from lack of control. So people would build these strings of towers, or they would build them in ways where they could essentially cover pieces of land, because these territory control towers had to be connected back to the origin, which is the keep, the castle in MMO2's case. So people would build these strings of territory control towers in order to build further out past where their castle actually is. But in MMO1, there were places, for example, like these giant granum rocks that you quite literally could not get onto. Like, you had to cheat or exploit to get on top of them. And players would exploit or cheat to get on top of them, build territory control towers, and then they would not tell people how to get up there, or they would undo how they got up there, right? And GMs didn't do anything about it. They just allowed it. So you essentially had unsiegeable TC towers in the game, meaning you could destroy everything they built in the area, but they could rebuild it because the TC tower was still up. And it wasn't, you couldn't get rid of it. It was extremely time consuming, placing, building, defending, and sieging.
Yep.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Too much time.
The sieging system was just a massive time sink. There had been sieges I was a part of that would take anywhere from like 6 to 8 hours, and almost nothing happens because the system just sucked. It just sucked really bad in MMO1. It encouraged players to siege at, quote, all times, end quote, in hopes there was no defense. So sieging in MMO1 was so bad that players would purposefully take time off of work. They would wake up on weekdays at 3 or 4 in the morning when they knew people were sleeping, or they would have to work that day.
Yep, like Rust.
And they would siege your things when you quite literally could not be around due to sleep or responsibility in life, whether it was a job, family, whatever it might be. This was a very common thing to do. This wasn't something that only certain groups did. Almost everyone did this, because otherwise the sieging was just so boring and monotonous to do, and it sometimes would quite literally be impossible to even do it because of there being player resistance. Most sieges revolved around spamming NPC guards, fire arrows, and elementalism magic. So in MMO1, players could actually place NPC guards around their structures that would shoot players, pets, and siege machines, so man-cannons and whatever else was used, like trebuchets, for example. They would shoot all of these things through the wall. So not only could you not kill some of these guards that they placed, but they would also shoot things through the wall as well. Fire arrows, for example, was another thing people would do. People would shoot fire arrows up from the walls of their keeps, or their walls or their structures, wherever they could stand, and they would shoot it at your siege equipment, because your siege equipment takes damage every time it fires something that would do damage to your assets. So a lot of times people would just sit up there with naked characters and just bow your siege machines down before they could even really do anything with fire arrows. And then elementalism magic in MMO1 was absolutely crazy with the amount of AoE spells that it did and had. And some of the spells in elementalism did asset damage, so you could use spells on structures and it would do damage. But most of the time it was usually used to just destroy the siege machines, or to just like hit a giant group of players that are trying to operate them. A lot of this stuff just honestly is the reason why a lot of players just wanted to siege at 4 in the morning, so they didn't have to deal with all this, because it just was not fun to deal with. It wasn't fair and it wasn't fun. StarVault constantly changed their rulings on siege-related events, so there was just no consistency as to what would happen. So Guild A could do something during a siege, and GMs do nothing, but then Guild B could do it, and the GM step in and say, you're not allowed to do that. So that's what I mean by this. Sieging used to be lucrative, and then it was nerfed to favor defenders, which it already did. So players used to be able to siege stuff in MMO1 and actually make money from it, because they could pick up the actual blueprints and the deeds from the things they destroyed.
Aggro.
But then StarVault got rid of that, so it just favored the defenders, which it already did, even more so. The PvP that would be gained from sieging was always awful, so it was laggy. You were constantly fighting people's pets and NPCs, whether they were being leashed through walls or shooting you through walls. People exploiting, like respawning themselves inside of the siege machine so they could break them and bug them out. Just a lot of stupid shit that people would do to just ruin your siege. You know, anything that they could do, people would exploit, they would cheat. Like, there was not anything anyone would do during these sieges to just win these sieges. Like, people play extremely unfair and break the rules to win.
Aggro.
It was ultimately used to drive people out of the game and make them quit. So a lot of times people would just siege your stuff, not because they wanted your things, but because they just wanted to make you quit the game.
Yep.
I mean, kind of a stupid system in my opinion. Like, sieging needs to be there, but at the same time, it also just drives players out, because
Yep.
we'll get into that later down this list about why this really makes sense. The overall system was unenjoyable, time-consuming, and extremely monotonous for both sides. It was honestly an AFK simulator, an NPC simulator, a guard spam simulator, a pet attacks all simulator.
Yep. And it works, but that's it.
The sieging in MMO1
It works, and that's all.
It was probably
it's
one
not
of the
fun
worst
or
things in the game that everybody who's ever participated in it can like 100% say this was abysmal and not fun. You know, the only people that I think genuinely enjoyed sieging in the game were people who just had too much time on their hands, and that's not even necessarily a jab at those people. It's just you had to have so much free time to prep these sieges and then to do them. So they clearly didn't have a lot to do from the beginning.
Aggro.
Going on to point number 2, sieging was not introduced at the beginning of MMO2 when castles, keeps, and player housing was available. So this is the big issue that a lot of players have with MMO2 when it comes to sieging, is the fact that it wasn't there in the beginning where people could actually acquire keeps and player houses. And so we're going to address this right now in some of these points. This has allowed players to safely farm and gather materials with no risk to their items. So that basically means that when no sieging is in place in the game, players were able to just farm to their heart's content and use their houses or keeps to just store things. And it's been like that up until recently, since they've added sieging. So now you're introducing this mechanic into the game that's going to absolutely change how the game works for a lot of players. And so to touch up on the point that I said I would touch up on later on in this list, talking about it was ultimately used to drive people out of the game and make them quit in MMO1, what's going to happen now is that players are going to get sieged and they're going to lose everything that they've ever gotten in the game because they've had all this safety. And somebody could point out and say, well, that's their fault. You know, they should adapt to the changes. But at the same time, it's like they started the game and there wasn't any sieging, and now it's here, and now they're going to potentially lose all their stuff because, you know, some asshole is mad and doesn't have anything else better to do but to just siege all your stuff down and just ruin your entire experience. That's why I think it should have just been in the game from the moment players were able to acquire keeps and housing from the first place, so that people came in and they were already under the impression that I could potentially lose everything. It allowed players to control castles, keeps, without risk. So at the very beginning of the game, a lot of people exploited and used bugs to get gold very quickly, to then buy castle deeds and then place them. And then since there was no sieging in the game, players couldn't destroy them, so they just had them, and they were just unopposed. So that's how a lot of guilds got their castles in the game right now, is because they just cheated the system at the very beginning, and since there was no sieging, nobody could get rid of them. And most of them have either profited from them by selling them now, or have socially engineered GMs to give them keeps to other guilds or groups that they have favors with. It's just a big can of worms, honestly, that we didn't have sieging from the beginning that allowed players to get keeps, which is one of the most important things in the entire game, without any kind of risk whatsoever. It created the ability to control areas without the ability to get rid of it. So what I mean by this is that without sieging being in the game prior, the game has experienced people having houses and other buildings and assets and whatever around the map where, sure, you can die outside of them, but you can have as much materials and gear as you want in those places, and they can just respawn and re-gear there, and you can't do anything about it. I guess you could say now they can, but it's just been that way for so long. I think people are going to be so used to just having all of this safety, and now you're going to have people start taking it away and destroying all of this stuff that people have hoarded over this time. And I'm telling you, like, it's going to make people quit when they lose everything. Like, again, some people can say, well, that's their own fault, and it's like, well, the game shouldn't have came out in the state it was in. It should have been in from the very beginning, or at least when houses and keeps were allowed to be obtained. That way players knew the risks from the beginning. And this fourth point talks about players who are now used to safety would now have to adapt to potentially massive loss due to aforementioned reasons, resulting in player loss. So this is the big one that is going to make the population drop. I don't think people understand that sieging is not going to make people want to play more. It's going to make them want to play less.
Yep.
People don't understand.
That's how raids are.
Sieging is a massive time and gold sink.
Raids are interesting and fun, but they're counterproductive to the game's lifespan.
Store stuff in city banks and never be able to lose that unless they take it out and die somewhere with it. But a lot of people in the game have, just simply stored all of their stuff in their houses or in their keeps or whatever they've built, their strongholds, because there's been no sieging in the game, so they've not had to worry about it. But now that sieging is in the game, these people are going to have to move thousands upon thousands of items to somewhere safe, but it's just like they're not going to have room anywhere to put it. A lot of people are just going to refuse to move anything, and they're just going to just hope that nobody sieges their stuff. But if they get sieged, they're shit out of luck. They lose everything at that point. Since the system was not introduced earlier, potential bugs and exploits may destroy players and guilds' game lifetime of work. So what I mean by this is that with every patch Starvault does, there's always some bugs or exploits that come along with them that never truly get figured out by the public at large, but few guilds and players will purposefully sit there and try to theory craft what they can do to abuse systems that get introduced. So could you imagine if somebody finds out a bug where they can just one-shot your building with a siege engine and then you just lose everything? And the GMs just say, "Oh, well, tough shit."
Sorry. That happens to Rust all the time.
You wouldn't even know. You wouldn't even know unless somebody told you that that's what happened or that it was recorded.
Yep.
But these are just the things that...
This is the problems with it.
Have to worry about.
It's why I couldn't do Rust very long. I never heard somebody actually I like this guy. I never heard somebody succinctly talk about the real problems with raiding and offlines and all this other stuff. It's like you're fighting shadow puppets all the time that you don't really understand or know about, and it's not good. It's not good. It's like all this stuff could be going on in the background while you're sleeping, and it is so negative.
This game is like, there's so many red flags in this being introduced right now that, God forbid, like, some people will literally lose thousands upon thousands of hours of playtime because somebody figured out how to one-shot your stronghold with a main cannon, and Starvault won't do anything about it. Number 3, sieging is a massive time sink. I obviously get that sieging in MO2 is going to be different than it was in MO1. I understand that. I don't think literally MO1 sieging is being translated into MO2. I know it's going to be changed and different, but you can't tell me that when somebody is streaming MO2 and they are riding over to a tower to then beat on it for 40 minutes with a club, with other players also beating on it,
yep,
and then proceeding to rebuild it.
That's how Rust is
not a massive time sink. Then we obviously just don't agree. We don't see eye to eye on the situation. I don't think having players go and beat on a tower is good gameplay. It's just not. I say sieging at its core should take time, but sieging will always be plagued by the problem of time. It just takes so much time. The game already has so many things in it that take so much time. It takes a lot of time to get around the map. It takes a lot of time to go get certain types of resources. It takes a lot of time to build up your character for combat ready and crafting ready. It takes a long time to get all of the characters you need together to actually craft things that you need, on a day-to-day basis in the game. You don't just have a weaponsmith and an armorsmith and a bow crafter and a shield crafter and an armor crafter. Like, you don't just have all these things off the bat. This stuff takes time to do. And I feel like the game already just wastes so much of your time with just really anti-quality of life mechanics that sieging is just another massive time sink that players are really gonna, learn to hate. Having sieging being a massive time sink will drive players to siege like how they did in MO1. Towers are not a good example of sieging isn't slow. I've had some people tell me that beating on a tower for 40 minutes is not a lot of time. I hate to say it, but like, if you're playing a game to quite literally beat on a tower for 40 minutes, I don't even know what kind of games you like playing. It's just weird. It is such a massive waste of time to just beat on a tower and call it gameplay. But for the way it's already looking, players will soon realize that it's easier to siege people when they're not around. I mean, think about it. If you knew somebody had stacks of gold in their stronghold, would you rather siege them while they're online and able to defend it, or would you rather siege them when you know they won't be on, they can't defend it, and you are guaranteed to get all that stacks of gold that's in their stronghold? Most people are going to do the latter. They don't care about getting a good fight. They don't care about being fair. They just want to hurt.
Never mind, I'm just going to go sell all this. It's cheaper.
The easier it is,
it's expensive to send it all.
That's just how most players are going to play the game. People do not care about the damage that they're going to be doing to the community with some of their actions in the game. And again, you can say, well, it's not my fault that it's in the game. That's what a lot of people said in MO1. And MO1 ended up having, on average, 100 players for 5 or 6 years. So, siege gameplay in Mortal has never been fun or engaging. It usually ends up becoming a game of repetition over hours. Again, this touches back on people going and beating on a tower. Telling me that it doesn't take that long, it's like, that's not the point. Like, if you think 40 minutes is a lot of time, whatever, we'll agree to disagree. But to tell me that beating on a tower is fine and that it's good gameplay, you're wrong.
Nope.
You're just wrong.
I mean, yes, he's right. Yeah. It's not good gameplay, no.
Guilds and alliances will now turn into zergs that ultimately split the server into 2 definitive sides. So a big problem in MO1, and I don't think this was just an MO1 problem. I think this will 100% always be a Mortal Online problem, regardless of it's the first game or the second, is that two sides will eventually emerge in this game, and guilds will be forced to choose one or the other, and if you don't, you get crushed under the heel of both of them. That's just how it works. So I go into detail by saying smaller guilds that do not abide by larger guilds and or alliances rules will now be destroyed on repeat, making it less likely for those guilds to continue playing the game, or they'll be absorbed into another group, whether it's another third-party group or it's into one of the two definitive sides. Guilds and alliances will swell in size, creating larger zergs, making it impossible to combat their efforts in any way. So let's say you're a small guild of 15 players and you have a massive alliance of 120 players siege you. You're just out of luck. You're just screwed. You're gonna lose everything. There's nothing you can do. You either have to do what that alliance wants you to do or be destroyed. And while some people will sit there and say, well, it's a sandbox game with politics, like that should always be an option. Players should be able to do what they want, but at the same time, it's like the system is going to allow people to destroy everything a guild has. And the result is what? Less players? It just doesn't make sense in my head from a game perspective. Like it doesn't seem like a good thing. Games like Rust get away with it because the time put into a base, for example,
I like this guy.
is not nearly the amount of time it takes to get a house completely built and filled, or a stronghold built and completely filled. It's not even remotely the same. The systems are not remotely the same. The crafting is not the same.
Warp drive active.
So you're going to see a lot of guilds swell in size. You're going to see alliances grow and get bigger, and there will eventually be two definitive sides, and they will be the deciding factors as to who gets to do what with their assets. Some people might say, well, that's never going to happen. There's plenty of guilds and alliances out there. There'll never be two definitive sides. Just wait. You just wait. When people start getting sieged and start losing everything, it is easier for some guilds to just side with one group and to be absorbed into the greater numbers so that their stuff is safe and that their members feel safe and they feel like they can keep playing the game. It's just easier to just do it, especially with the amount of time sink that's in the game. Is it really worth losing all of your stuff because you want to be independent? A lot of people are not going to be independent. Just won't happen. Goes on to say, two definitive alliances will ultimately make the game feel more politically boring and uninteresting. Yes, the game will just begin to stagnate because people will begin to band up. There'll be less conflict overall politically and PvP, fighting over resources. There will be less of it. A lot of drama will come from infighting and splits inside of groups until people are slowly whittled out of the game, whether it's through quitting, losing interest in the game, or simply going to another group. Having two definitive alliances will cause both sides to slowly bleed players until one side can never take the other, leaving one opposed side. This will eventually happen. One side will eventually lose, either because they weren't active enough, they've lost players, or because they genuinely are losing the quote war in the game. Typically, a big alliance does not die because of the last reason. They don't lose the war in total. It's usually because members eventually get tired of getting killed, griefed, and tired of just dealing with the gameplay loop that is sieging warfare in Mortal. So they might go to the other side to just have it easy, or they'll just quit because the game's boring, and then eventually their alliance won't be sustainable enough to oppose the other one. And once that happens, you have one mega alliance that just rules everything, and people might think, well, if that happens, wouldn't they just all split back up and go to do their own things again after defeating their enemy? and they.
God damn it! Did you screw up here?
Imagine two massive alliances just constantly like having fights over certain things. People are not going to have fun running around with 15 to 20 FPS, having pets leashed on them, getting blown up by a giant fucking meatball storm falling on their head. You know, people are just not, they're not going to stay to play a game like that. The game will lose players because of things like this. People think, oh, big epic battle. It's not going to be a big epic battle. It's going to be a big epic laggy disaster because the server will shit its pants and you're not going to be able to play the game how you want to. It's just not going to happen. They can't even have more than 2,000 people on the server at once without having issues. You think they're going to have big massive battles in the same spot and there not be any issues at all? You're crazy. Number 5. StarVault have severe issues with time involving patching, hotfixing, etc. So what I mean by this is that, and I addressed these in some of the points, but StarVault does not have a good track record of doing things in a timely manner. They like to sit on their hands. They like to focus on other things when more problematic issues arise. So to go into it, game-breaking exploits or bugs can ruin a group's entire plan to siege. So, let's say, for example, you're sieging someone's stronghold, and then it comes out in an announcement from StarVault, hey, we just found a bug in sieging, nobody's allowed to siege anymore. So they prevent you from continuing the siege, you've now just wasted all your time and resources starting one. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
Rollbacks are entirely possible, causing progress during sieges to be undone. This has happened a lot of times in MMO1. Can you imagine you siege some enemy down, get all their shit, and then because StarVault found like some kind of critical error in their system or database, they have to roll the server back 6 hours, and now all your progress is just undone, or a majority of it is just gone now? It'll happen. Nodes will crash, the server will have issues, NPCs will dupe, something will break, something's exploitable, rollbacks will happen and wipe out your progress, and you're not going to be happy about it, but you're playing the game and supporting it. So you should just expect it to happen. Exploits and bugs may exist while StarVault refused to fix it until the next content patch, allowing players to abuse them. I don't even think I have to give examples of this happening in the game. If you have been playing Mortal Online 2, you know for a fact StarVault does this a lot. There will be issues in the game that severely need fixing, and they just refuse to do it until a certain period of time has gone by. Well, it'll be fixed in the next patch, so people can just keep doing it until we get to it. Oh, if you catch people, record them and report them, and we'll get them banned. That is no proper solution to issues like this, especially when it involves players' time and progress in mass, especially if you're talking about sieging specifically, which is what this is what it is referring to, sieging. Again, what if somebody exploits your house in some way and destroys it instantly? And StarVault not only does nothing to compensate you for it, but they also tell you that it's not going to be fixed for 2 weeks because they can't find out what's wrong. What is your reaction going to be to that? Oh, well, at least there's no subs going on. Anyway, point 6 is my final point. StarVault's GM team. GMs were known to interfere in big sieges in the original game, and it has been shown in MMO2 that GMs do interfere in the gameplay of others without any consistent rule set. So I don't know if people are even aware of this, and I don't have the exact specific details, including the players' names, the GM names, and all of that, but I know for a fact that GMs have been socially engineered on MMO2 into giving away keeps, aka castles, to other players and guilds without them actually having access to do that. The player that is socially engineering the GM to do it. So with sieging coming out, can you imagine what players could potentially do just through social engineering? They could have GMs do. They could have them revert HP on a structure. They could have them revert HP on siege machines. They could have their stuff rolled back. Like, you know, there's just so many variables and possibilities with this kind of way of thinking that StarVault's GM team, they are going to have their hands all up in this shit. And there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it. You're just going to have to accept it. GMs could deem certain actions taken during a siege to be illegal, resulting in player bans, or the siege to be stopped entirely from either side. So this happened in MMO1 as well. You could be doing something in a siege, think nothing's wrong, and a GM shows up and say, "Hey, you're not allowed to do that." It's like, how would you know? There's no rule set to sieging. There's no announcement as to why I'm not allowed to do this, and they say, "Oh, well, sorry, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're getting a 3-day ban, and this siege is over." What do you do then? You just lost all your progress. You just lost all of your siege prep, all because the GM just said, "Hey, you've got some people doing something they shouldn't be doing, and we know you weren't aware of it, but now you are, and you're getting banned for it." It happens. It 100% happens. Don't think it doesn't happen just because it doesn't happen to you. And my final point, player GMs do exist in game, meaning they could potentially influence the outcome of these events. Do not think for a second that StarVault does not have player GMs. They quite literally hired a player who did not play Mortal Online 1, the first game, to be their community manager. They didn't even pick
I remember that guy.
who came from the
Yeah, I
original
remember
game
him.
that knew
Yep.
about the game. They picked someone who
That's very
started
true,
in
actually.
MMO2
I remember
and
him.
knew
He
almost
was
nothing
like
about the game
definitely squelching me
to
when
be
I
their
was being
community
angry.
manager. And you want to believe that they are willing to hire professional third-party GMs to come into their game to do things right, even when it's been shown consistently in both games that these GMs do not adhere to any kind of consistent rule set, and they always have some different explanation as to why things are, or to the way they do things. Players are GMs in this game. If you don't believe that, I don't know what to tell you. It's not that hard to understand. A player can be a GM in this game very easily. And that's it, guys. This is my reasons for why territory control is bad. Could I have thrown some more stuff in there? I totally could have. I could have easily added more stuff to any of these points, but I feel like these points are big enough problems in my eyes for people to not take this patch seriously and to know that this game is definitely in trouble. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing the series on why Mortal Online 2 is bad. This is part 3, and we're going to be covering RMT in Mortal Online 2. If you don't know what RMT is, don't worry, I will be explaining it to you, but I assume most people will know what it is. So let's just jump right into it.
I'm listening. Be careful.
What is RMT?
My goods are of the
RMT
highest
is an
quality.
acronym for real money trade. It means to pay actual money for things in games such as services, items, accounts, etc. So if you've ever heard of a friend or a guild member or someone that you know saying that they paid money for some gold in a game, or they bought a new piece of gear, whatever it might be, that's RMT. RMT is an issue in a lot of games, but it has heavily affected MMO2. Now, a lot of games I know suffer from RMT issues, but they're not so bad as to the point that they absolutely destroy the game itself. MMO2 is not in that category. MMO2 has definitely been destroyed by RMT. And we're going to talk about reasons why RMT is so prevalent in this game as well. RMT influences players to do things they normally wouldn't do, so this generally makes people lie,